All right, everyone. Welcome in. We're going to let this breathe for just a second. Let me see if I can get the other ones in here for us. What am I missing? We got them all? Oh, one more. See if we can get them all in. All right, looks like we got all green check marks, everyone. Welcome into Building the Broncos. Well, today got a special little Christmas gift coming in here with Nick once again having a little baby time with his wife, getting things everything ready for their little bundle of joy coming. So that means that you guys get blessed with Mr. Erick Trickel joining me here this evening. Eric, how you doing, bud?
Doing good. And just got to point out, you said a little Christmas gift. I'm more like a big Christmas gift. But I'm doing great. It was great to watch the Broncos win. It's great to be joining you on a Tuesday night and just talk more Broncos football.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, 5-game winning streak. What else could you be asking for? You know, longest win streak in the NFL, beating top teams in the NFL to do it even. It's just been a crazy run by the Broncos, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit tonight. I know power rankings sometimes are always a little bit crazy of how everybody decides to view them. But there is actually even one big power ranking out there that has the Broncos top 10 now, which is just when we were 1-5, you know, at that Packers game. I remember we were sitting there talking, just going, man, this kind of sucks to not know, do we really want them to win? Do we not want them to win just because it gets them a better draft pick? And, you know, just trying to look for the glass half full in these kind of podcasts. Like, how do we even talk about the Broncos when they're just stinking it up and losing 70-20? And here we are now talking not only possible top 10 in the rankings, but possibly even cracking the playoffs, the scenarios. If they win this week and Colts lose, Broncos are in that 7th seed, which is just like I said, I can't think that anybody out there predicted this is what would happen after that 1-5 start.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, we went from talking about Caleb Williams or Drake May to playoffs, and the turnabout has been so great. And it's not just, you know, it isn't just watching the Broncos win, but it's what they've done to win those games. The excitement of all these turnovers, and even though the offense hasn't been super exciting, they've had those splash plays to sit there and help keep them in it. It's been great to watch. And as somebody who's been covering the team since 2013, like all those years of terrible Broncos football, even though this isn't the best I've seen when I've covered the team, it's better than the last few years. And it is so refreshing and so exciting to be able to watch this team improve as they have as the season's gone on.
Yeah, Nick and I started doing the podcast back in 2016. So that's last season that they had a winning record. They didn't make the playoffs. They went 9-7, missed the playoffs. And then we did that draft, the Garrett Bowles draft. And so, yeah, we've had nothing to talk about but bad football, unfortunately. And so it's nice to be talking about a winning team, getting ready to enter into December and to be playing meaningful games. You know, this is a big one on Sunday. Those tiebreakers.
Mm-hmm.
I really do think there's going to be a 10-7 team that misses the playoffs in the AFC.
Yeah, I said a couple weeks ago it was before the Vikings game, I think it was. Lance and I, we were sitting down, we were talking about records and what the Broncos needed to do to get back into it and why winning that Vikings game was so important. Well, it's because I don't think a 10-7 team is enough. I think you have to win 11 games. And with how this AFC is shaping up, that might not be enough. There is a huge drop off after the good teams in the AFC to the really bad teams. So it's great that the Broncos are still in it. This is another one of those games against the Texans that they have to go out there and win for the tiebreaker reasons, as you stated, as well as just keep themselves in the hunt. It helps that they have the Chargers twice on the back end of the schedule and they have another game against the Raiders because they're talking about playoffs. Well, I don't think they'll win the division, but having 3 still divisional games left can still help that. It just, of course, depends on what the Chiefs do. And the Chiefs have been struggling of late. So The door is still open. It's not fully shut on winning the division, even though I question if they'll be able to, pull it through.
Yeah, we'll get into that, but we definitely want to get to the chat here. And we got David coming in here with a $10 super chat to get us started for the evening, saying, would you say 8 to 9 wins is the floor for the Broncos? And do you think using these final 6 games to determine your long-term plan 3 to 5 years from now is as important as pushing for the playoffs? So let's start with that first. Is the floor 8 to 9 wins for this team at this point?
I mean, before the season, that's about where I had him. 8 to 9 wins, maybe 10, depending on how things went. Right on the cusp of the playoffs. Things changed after that 1-5 start because multiple of those games that were those losses were games that were must wins. But fortunately, some of the teams that I thought would be tough aren't tough, and that we still have left on the schedule. So I still think 8 to 9 wins is the floor for this team. As I said, at 6-5. Divisional games are always tough, even if the Raiders and the Raiders and the Chargers are bad teams. So yeah, I still think 8 to 9 wins is still the floor for this team.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think you still got the Patriots at home. That's not a guaranteed win, but it's up there. Like if there is a guaranteed win left on the schedule, it's that one. Like I said, you got Chargers at home. They might be out of the playoff race at that point. Team falling apart. I know you've heard there's been some rumblings about whether Staley even makes it through the season as their head coach. Raiders in that final game of the season in week 18, if they're out of the playoffs, what are they doing? They're probably in that evaluation process of who are we keeping, who are we not, trying to get some young players out there. So maybe they're not playing for completely a win. I mean, I'm not saying that they're trying to not win a game, but maybe they're putting a few younger players out there that haven't gotten as much run. So yeah, I would say 8 to 9 wins is definitely the floor. I'd say 11 is the ceiling. I can't see the Broncos going undefeated to finish out the season here, as much as I really would love to see that. And I do think that they've probably won against their toughest opponents. Detroit's kind of floundering here a little bit. Houston with the rookie quarterback, I mean, they're good. Don't get me wrong. I watched their game from this last week. They should have won that one. So they're going to be a real tough opponent. Like I said, this is a big one for the Broncos. Now, talking about the long-term plan for the Broncos, I think at this point, it would be hard to see the Broncos not having Russell Wilson as part of the long-term plan, at least for a couple of years. Just the kind of season he's had, I think he's mostly earned staying here with the Broncos. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely the issue of the contract for the production. That's always going to be an issue. $250 million for the production they're getting out of him. It's not the most cost-efficient contract out there, but he's showing what he can do and still help this team. I've had issues with his pre-snap reads all season long, but against the Browns, he was excellent there. This was the best game I've seen from Russell Wilson this season with the pre-snap reads. There were placement issues. There were other issues, but he finally seems to be getting back in, like, fully into his old self. There were a lot of issues when he'd start scrambling that he'd drop his eyes downfield and go to run instead of keeping his eyes open. Well, there were multiple plays where he was using his legs to extend plays, but kept his eyes downfield. It led to that great catch by Marvin Mims that barely touched the Browns player, and Mims had to adjust for it. So we're seeing what he can still do. And it's similar to, that 2015 season with Peyton Manning. I mean, we saw the decline in 2014, and it wasn't as bad as what we got from Russell Wilson last year, but there was still that question of, like, do you really want to keep paying Peyton Manning as much as they were? I remember that being the conversation for it. And granted, the quarterback contracts are 3 times as expensive, 2 times as expensive now, but it was still that conversation. And if Wilson can continue to use his brain and knowledge and experience to help the Broncos offense, I think, yeah, it is worth keeping him around with this team. But there's still that issue of they're not in the best cap spot, after the season. So there are going to be a lot of changes coming, and he's going to have to, still improve. And maybe that second year in the system will help that to help continue carrying this team.
Yeah. And we got David McElrath coming in with a $5 super. Good to see you, David. Saying, good evening, Broncos country. Carl, Eric, Dylan, and Deacon Scott. Hashtag 11 and 6. Hashtag Buckham times 3. Hashtag MHH for life. Hashtag Denver Broncos for life. If there's really anybody that believed the Broncos could still be a playoff team after being 1-5, it's probably David. I mean, he's always put into each one of his super chats, that the Broncos are going to go undefeated the rest of the season pretty much, or lose. I guess he has one loss here. So he's got some realism in there. But no, David, you've been on it, saying that the Broncos are going to turn this thing around, and just appreciate your support here, and good evening to you as well. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, your positivity. I mean, and there's been other chatters too who bring such a good positivity about this Broncos team. It's always refreshing, even when we get down in the dumps about covering this team, as all of us were after that 1-5 start. So, Papa Bear, thank you for the donation. Thank you for the constant optimism that you bring every show, every week. We appreciate that.
And we got Michael Ronquillo coming in saying, "Good evening, Carl and Eric on building the Broncos. Go Broncos." Another one of our just consistent supporters, day in, day out, week in, week out. We appreciate it, Michael. Always good to see you in here and bringing the support. So, yes, definitely go Broncos. And hopefully this Sunday, bringing another victory, 6 in a row. And like I said, if they win this one, I'm not sure exactly what their odds are for going to the playoffs, but I think it pretty much jumps about double in percentage-wise if I looked at it right earlier this week. That's just how big this one is to separate, to, like I said, have those tiebreakers. You got tiebreakers then over the Bills, the Browns, and the Texans, all teams right there in that level. And that would be just huge, huge for the Broncos. I don't think there's a bigger game left on their schedule than this one.
Yeah, especially when you factor in, the tiebreakers, because the Detroit Lions are a big team. They're a good team. They're in the playoff hunt, but that's still NFC. So yeah, this is probably the biggest game they have left. And I think you're correct. They're sitting at like 30% chances to make the playoffs based off of ESPN analytics. And if they were to beat the Texans, I think it jumps up to like 57, 58%. So
yeah,
not quite double, but pretty darn close to it.
Yeah. We got KB82 coming in with a $4.99 super chat saying, "What are the chances Jaquan McMillan will be starting for years to come across from PS2?" I think it's pretty. I mean, I don't know if he'll be an outside corner.
Yeah.
But he has proven he is truly a slot corner that should stick around for a while here for the Broncos. He's been impressive. His ability to come up and help in the run game. I think that was one of the things with Chris Harris Jr. Like, he was so smart. He always knew where to be in the run game. And that is such an underrated part of the slot cornerback position. Like, you have to be willing to come up and make tackles. Teams trying to get to that edge, if you're not going to be that guy, you can't play that position. So the fact that he is physical, he's punching at that football, can pretty much cover guys down the field. He's got the athleticism to stick with them. He's pretty smart out there. I definitely think he's going to be sticking around for a while.
Yeah, I definitely think that he will probably permanently find himself in the slot just because of he's a little bit on the smaller side of it, but he still plays big. And last year, to close out the season, he got the start on the outside against the Chargers and handled himself well against Mike Williams, Josh Palmer, and Keenan Allen. I'm a huge fan of Jaquan McMillan. I was a huge fan of him coming out. I was super excited the Broncos signed him as an undrafted free agent because he always plays bigger. He's always was physical coming downhill against the run, and he was sticky in coverage. Now, this was his worst game of the season, but he showed during the game when he would make a mistake, he didn't make that same mistake again. And there's a 2-play sequence where the Browns basically ran the same play twice at different points in the game. First one, he got beat badly and gave a big catch. And the second one, he stuck right by it. He didn't buy the fake. He knew what was coming, and he just read it and played it throughout. I'm really excited to see what more there is to come from Jaquan McMillan.
Yeah, I mean that secondary, it's turning into a huge strength when we had a big question mark about that unit heading into the season. And I mean, they've had to make a lot of changes. Locke has proven to be at a whole new level than he's been any other point in his career. Especially these last couple games that he's started, he's really feeling comfortable, making a lot of plays. Now, he's made a couple stupid mistakes. Yeah. His late hit, I don't know what you'd call it, to give up the touchdown there to the Browns. I mean, he went up high, defenseless receiver, all those kind of things. It was just a stupid decision. He wasn't going to catch that ball and cost the Broncos 4 points there. But beyond that, like I said, he made up for it later on in the game, making some big plays, sticky in coverage, helping in the run game. He's another one I saw early in the game. There's a run play to the left side by the Browns, and he didn't come up, and they got a big gain. And I think even the announcers kind of talked about like Locke's got to recognize that this run's coming this way and he's got to get up there and make the play. And then later in the game, they did a pretty similar play. And there he is right there to make that play in the run game. So, guys learning on just right there in the middle of the game to not make the same mistakes. It's just great to see the intelligence on the field. It's not just that they're being physical. It's not that they're just making plays. They're really being smart in what they're bringing compared to early in the season.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, Locke, he's been great. He should remain starter once Kareem Jackson is back. The penalty on him was a little ticky-tacky, but by rules as written, the flag was thrown. It was a penalty, just a little bit of a weak one.
Yeah.
But Daniel Vasquez comes in with the $4.99 donation. Thank you, Daniel. We appreciate that. He says, let's go Broncos. We are ready to see them here in Houston beat the Texans. I am too. I would love to see them go in there and beat the Texans. I'm a big fan of CJ Stroud. I like what the Texans are doing, and I'm going to be rooting them for them going forward as well. But I mean, the Broncos come first, right? I mean, the Broncos, I want to see the Broncos go and compete for this playoff spot.
Do you think this is a good or bad matchup for the Broncos?
I think it's an interesting one. And defensively, I think it's a good matchup for the Broncos. Offensively, we've seen the run game do most of the work for the Broncos, especially during this streak, and then a few splash plays. Well, they have the weakest schedule in terms of passing defenses left, and the hardest schedule left in terms of rushing defenses. And the Texans, they do a solid job against the run, but they allow explosive plays. They allow quarterbacks to move the ball through the air pretty consistently. They're still putting together the secondary and the coverage units within that defense. So I think it's going to be a little bit tough for them to get the running game going, but this should be a game where we see Russell Wilson and the Broncos passing attack do more than they have over the other games that they've had during this streak.
Yeah, especially if they continue with that communication pre-snap. I know it's going to be a little bit tougher on the road. Houston, thankfully, is not a very loud stadium from what I've heard. So maybe they'll be able to communicate a little bit. But we got Phil McLaughlin coming in with some stars saying, good evening, Eric and Carl. Love the hat, Eric. Oh, yeah, that's a good choice there. Got to say, I think this could be a coming out game for Russ. 27-21 Broncos. Hashtag Buckham. Hashtag MHH for life. Hashtag go Broncos. Phil, yeah, like Eric just said, this is one of those games Russ has to go take advantage of the opportunities. They have some major holes in that secondary, and Houston likes to get pretty aggressive too. They love to send a pretty big blitz package, and if the offensive line can continue to hold up and grow like they've been doing, and you got Samaje Perine, I loved him in pass protection. I mean, that man is just a wall when a linebacker or safety tries to come blitz up the middle. If they can give him just a little bit of time, Wilson can definitely go out there and make some big plays down the field. So could be that game where we see a little bit more of those explosive plays, like you said, down the field. Maybe Mims gets another one of those big, deep passes that we saw early in the season.
Yeah, I think this game especially is one where, so during the win streak, Javonte Williams hasn't been overly efficient as a runner, and I'm not saying he's been bad, but this is a game where I think because of what Perine adds to the passing game, which for some reason Williams has not been great when kept in the block, and then there was the issue. There's those two passes against the Browns too, where Williams and Russ were just a little bit off. They ended up ended up leading to two incompletions. This is a game where I would like to see Samaje Perine get involved more offensively and a little less Javonte Williams. More of a 50-50 split that they intended when they brought in Perine for when Williams was healthy, but they've gotten away from that, and it's been a very much basically a 75-25% split with Williams to the other running backs. So I'd like to see a little bit more balance there and an increased usage of Perine, because what he's been doing during the streak has been outstanding.
Yeah, I put out there on Twitter this week that my hot take was Samaje Perine has been the best all-around running back on this roster.
Yeah.
And it's not a shot at Javonte. It really isn't. It's more just what Perine's been able to do. He's been special, like I said, as a runner, pass catcher, even a blocker. All three phases there for the running back. But we got Tom Lockoff coming in with a $4.99 super saying Broncos defense is filled with young, cheap players, but they will need to look for beefy line help in the draft and free agency next year. Yeah, you're completely right. Unfortunately, that defensive line, especially, you got Allen, who's playing in great football. I mean, he's had a couple lulls here and there, but he's still making some incredible plays out there for the defense. You got Jones, who's not quite living up to the hype, I would say, of what you brought him in and how much you paid him to be. He's supposed to be one of those top 5 run stuffers on defense. And he's been a little bit up and down. But beyond those two, there just really isn't much in that grouping. And so definitely need to revamp that group. Edge group, it'd be nice to add another piece. It's just hard because it's expensive. It's hard to find them always in the draft. If you aren't getting there in the top, 5 picks or so, it's hard to find that guy that's going to be an immediate impact for you. I mean, you can still find them. Don't get me wrong. But, and I think there's a couple of them there in the mid area of the first round. I would definitely wouldn't mind seeing the Broncos go after to add to the edge group. But defensive line, I definitely would rather go free agency than the draft or maybe even a trade. I know you and I talked about that earlier this week of with Carolina possibly going on a fire sale here at the end of the year. That there's a defensive lineman that they have that would be incredible if the Broncos could bring in, but I'm afraid it'd probably cost them their first round pick.
Yeah. I mean, and the issue with using draft picks on defensive linemen is that, I mean, obviously you get those guys every now and then that come out year one and just completely dominate. But for the most part, defensive linemen, especially early guys, take that 2 or 3 years before they really break out and emerge as a player. And this isn't a strong defensive line class. That doesn't mean there aren't some guys. But I mean, if they're going to take somebody early, there's that big guy out of Texas whose name I can't remember now, but he's like 350,000 pounds. Dude is big, but he's so quick. When I watch him, he reminds me of Terrence Knighton with how quick he is, shooting gaps and everything, that he brings a little bit of one gap ability as a nose tackle. He's so quick. He's got plenty of power to hold up against double teams. He's one of the guys that I have my eye on for the Broncos earlier in the draft. I'm not sure. I mean, I've heard a lot of round one talk with him. Testing will be important for him and size. And there's been some rumblings that he struggled to keep his weight in check and everything. But thanks, Scott. T'Vondre Sweat is the guy. Big dude. I'm a big fan of him. He's got a teammate there in Texas too that I like as well. But those are guys that I would like the Broncos to go out there and pick up. But speaking of the issues on the defensive line, I always felt it was a mistake for the Broncos to not add somebody really outside of Zach Gallen, because they're betting on improvement from Ayoma Uwazurike, Matt Henningsen, and Jonathan Harris. One of them got suspended for the season for being dumb and gambling on NFL games, including the team that he's on and games he was playing in. And then Harris and Henningsen never haven't shown that development. And in the case of Harris, he didn't do anything to, earn that love for him of saying, hey, this is a guy we can actually develop. So it was always questionable to me. And it's definitely one of the biggest weaknesses on this team. Run defense continues to be an issue because their defensive line just isn't holding up.
Yeah. I mean, when 92's on the field, you can see teams are kind of like pointing him out, like we're running at this guy because he's going to get pushed 5 yards back almost every single play, or he's going to fall on the ground. One of the two. Unfortunately, that seems to be the Broncos. I think Nick kind of brought it up at one point, saying the Broncos spend more time on the ground than any other team on the defensive line. Yeah. Those guys just fall down. It just doesn't work well. But we got Troy Boer coming in with a $10 super chat saying, hey guys, how bad is Russell Wilson's contract if he stays for 2 more years? Have discussed how bad it is if we move on, but is it okay for a barely out of the top 10 quarterback? Have a great show. Thank you, Troy. Great question. So I got up his contract pulled up here. So next year, his cap hit would be $35.4 million. I mean, it's big, but really in the quarterback market, that's probably what you're looking at for anybody that's going to be having a non-rookie contract that is a starting quarterback. And then the next year, that's kind of the big one. The 2025 hit is $55.4 million. So they're definitely gonna have to do something about that. Now the cap is expected to go way up over these next few years. They've got the YouTube money coming in. They got Amazon money that's coming in, CBS, Fox. I mean, they've got money coming in from a lot of different streams. That's really upped what the cap's going to go to. You were talking about the Peyton Manning contract on his last year. He was making $18 million. And that was just 8 years ago. That's what top quarterbacks were making, was 18, 20, 22 million, something like that. So to see them what they are today is crazy. But so yeah, next year, I don't think it's that detrimental to the team. There's still a lot of contracts that they can work with. Tim Patrick, they can move on from him. Jerry Jeudy, they can figure out something with his contract. Bowles, I think they can rework that deal. Do you think he's earned staying with the Broncos beyond this season?
I think they'll look at extending him and trying to lower that cap hit and just give him more long-term stability with his deal.
Yeah, because I can't see them staying on his contract, what he's got right now. But he's definitely been playing out of his mind. Another great game this last week. And I know Garrett got hurt. And I know everybody's probably going to talk about that, just like they talked about Patrick Mahomes being sick when the Broncos played him. But still, he held his own against maybe the best pass rusher in football, an athletic freak. And they tried to help him on some plays, but there were times where he was on an island. And he definitely did well on most of those reps.
Yeah, with Wilson's contract, the issue has never been the 2024 aspect of it. It's still a reasonable deal. The issue is that keeping him on the 5th day of the new league year after the season guarantees his 2025 salary. That has always been the issue. If it was a situation where you keep him for 2024 and then you still have an option of getting rid of him, then it was never a situation of, oh, they should cut him after 2023, after this season. But it's not. And then that 2025 season is a huge jump in the cap hit. It's going from about 14% in 2024 for a salary cap number to 20% of the salary cap. It's over $55 million against the salary cap. And it's just, if you keep him, you're guaranteeing he's on the roster for 2 more years. That has always been my issue with his contract. If you keep him for 2024, you're keeping him for 2025 as well. And I with what he's doing, I still have issues of guaranteeing that second year. He deserves 2024, but after that, that's where the issue is for me, is guaranteeing that base salary that he has for the 2025 season.
Yeah, and we got Chase Wellner coming in with a $2 super saying, how are you guys feeling on the O-line overall? I think really, if you're talking about the strength of this team right now, I mean, I know you got some players on the defense. Maybe you could talk about secondary, but I think right now it's the offensive line. This unit has really, considering where they were week 1 to where they are now, the growth is just incredible. It's part of this 5-game win streak is what they've been able to do, both in the pass and the run game. They've been a little bit up and down in the run game, but I think pass game especially, they've really stepped up, given Wilson some room to roam. Garrett Bowles, like I said, has really had a great bounce back season. Ben Powers has been getting a little bit better. He really struggled early in the season. Cushenberry has been good during this 5-game win streak. Miners, I think he probably could have an argument for an all-pro season with especially what he's been showing. And then, on the right tackle spot, he's been up and down. Don't get me wrong. McGlinchey's been up and down, but he's been better. I think he's been more consistent, especially over these last few weeks compared to where he was early in the season. So yeah, this unit, definitely a strength of this team, something you can move forward with and say, this is probably a unit you can try to keep together. I'm starting to lean towards Cushenberry's maybe earned a second contract. I hate saying that because he's had like 3 years of horrible, horrible play. And I don't like doing that. Like a player all of a sudden gets good during a contract season. But the fact that we're seeing the entire offensive line, take this big bump forward as a unit makes me believe that part of it was a coaching issue. And that now once we've gotten some good offensive line coaching, now we're seeing what this unit can be.
For me, this unit is a top 8 unit in the NFL. They do give up pressures, and Russell Wilson's able to accommodate for that. Sometimes he crumbles, sometimes he makes something magic happen. But they've been good run blocking unit. Even when McGlinchey was struggling, even when Powers was struggling, they were still doing well as run blockers. With their even though with the issues in pass protection, Quinn Miners 100% should be a Pro Bowler and should be in the All Pro conversation. He's been a top 3 guard in the NFL this season. And then as for Cushenberry, the improvement is great, and he definitely has earned an extension. The problem is the financials of it. You have a big contract to Mike McGlinchey. You have a big contract to Ben Powers. You have the contract status being up in the air with Garrett Bowles right now. And then you have Quinn Miners, who is eligible for an extension after the season, though they'll probably wait to extend him until either sometime during next season or just after. That would be a lot of money spent on the offensive line. And it just seems that the Broncos are ready to try and get a compensatory pick for Cushenberry and then turn to Luke Wattenberg or Alex Forsyth after this season. And it's nothing against Cushenberry. He's earned that contract. It's just the finances with the cap situation the Broncos are in just doesn't add up.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And that happens sometimes where you're going to have to lose some good players. When you're a good team, you lose good players just because there's only so much money that can go around. You think of the Broncos, that 2015 team, how many players did they lose? Malik Jackson having to go. I think one of the linebackers ended up going somewhere. I can't remember which one. Yep, that's right. And man, that was the one that really got me because I love that guy. He was one of my favorite players on the Broncos that season. Just such an underrated player of that great defensive unit. But and then Shaq Barrett, that was another one that the Broncos had to. I think he maybe was one more year and then they lost him. Or did he get lost after the
years?
Okay. But still, like I said, that's what happens. You become a good team, you lose good players. It's how you get compensatory picks. And so hopefully that's what starts happening for the Broncos here soon. And like I said, this is what happens when you bring in good coaching. Players grow, and then you got young players that can eventually step up. And I know you and I both liked Forsyth in this past draft. He didn't test well by any means, but I think he's one of those guys that could do well, especially in this offensive system and what they're wanting from the center position. And you still got Wattenberg from a couple drafts ago. Definitely need to see what he can bring. And this is where you depend on your coaching to keep this unit strong.
Yeah. And I really like what Zach Strife has done. I like Sean Payton's mold of how he's always followed with it. And looking at what Sean Payton's done is another reason why I think that Lloyd Cushenberry is on his way out. And with the situation the Broncos are in with the cap situation, they're going to be stuck for another couple of years. And adding in that extra compensatory pick can just help alleviate it a little bit. That is always the issue when you start trading away picks. And it's an issue that the Saints got in when they kept trading picks for players. It's an issue the Rams got into because they were trading picks for star players. Is you don't get those cheap contracts coming in that you got to try to develop to replace those expensive free agents that you're leaving. And one of the best models that we've seen, and it's something the Patriots have done or did for years, they get SARs, they let them leave, they get the compensatory picks, and they just have somebody that they've developed to fill right in. So it's definitely one of the one of the big things to try and get to, and something Sean Payton and hopefully is able to do with this Broncos team.
And on a different note, just a side note here, Dalton Reisner continues to struggle there for the Vikings. And, I know a lot of people had a lot of love for him because he's the local guy. And I get it. And he had that great rookie season, just showed such promise. This is going to be one of those guys that you really begin to build that offensive line around. And nope, he just continues to fall off and continue to show he's not worth it. The Broncos made the right decision to move on from him. And Ben Powers, he's been up and down. Don't get me wrong. He's not been perfect at that left guard position, but I still think that was money well spent to upgrade that position, because to have such a weakness on the offensive line really could have derailed a lot of these games.
Definitely. And I think Ben Powers, and I talked about this earlier in the season too, talked about it in the preseason when we were seeing him. The issues are in pass protection. And even though his play as a run blocker wasn't worth that contract, it was still a massive upgrade over what the Broncos were getting from Dalton Risner last year as a run blocker. I mean, he and Cushenberry were just turnstiles in the middle of it, of that line. And it's great to see that Cushenberry has bounced back a little bit after replacing Dalton Risner, which definitely can have some impact on his performing better. It's one of those things where sometimes um it's great for the the local kid, the fan favorite. Philip Lindsay was one, Dalton Risner was one. But when they get around and start looking at other teams, you can see what other teams think of them. Dalton Risner was a late signing because teams didn't view him very well. And Philip Lindsay, he signed cheap and then he bounced around for the NFL for a while and then left. That is always something to keep an eye on, because if an NFL team is passing on you and we're waiting on you for a long time, it means that you're not good enough, because if they think you're good enough, they're going to go sign you to that big contract right away. And so it was kind of a clear sign that Dalton Risner, I mean, he'll probably bounce around the league for a little while just because he's got so much experience, but he's not trending in the right direction. And fortunately, it's not happening with the Broncos. I know a lot of Bronco fans wanted to give him a big contract last season, even with the poor play, writing it off, as Hackett and Butch Berry's issues on the offensive line. But it's great that it was a great decision to move on from him and go get Powers, even though he hasn't fully lived up to his contract.
Yeah, like I said, it's you want those local guys to be able to make it. I love when the Broncos bring in players from like Colorado State or University of Colorado, and hope that those guys could become something. But unfortunately, a lot of times it doesn't seem to work out like you hope for. And you give them opportunities, but it's still up to them to go make a play. But all right, let's get this comment, and then we can get to maybe our main topic of the day. We got Thunder Snow 1 with a $9.99 super chat coming in saying, "Long-time listeners, first-time typers." Well, I'm glad that this is your first time coming in, and it's with Building the Broncos and Eric and I. It says, "Me and the kiddos are in Kansas City." I feel for you. I live in Kansas, so I'm surrounded by Chiefs fans, so I get it. It kind of stinks. But he says, "We are stoked with the Broncos, but they have work to do. They must stay run-centric and jam it down the Texans' throat." I agree to a point of, like you still want to stay committed to what you're good at. Like even if the other team is good at stopping the run, I still think the Broncos can still have some success in the run game. But this is one of those games where they're going to have to back that defense off. I think the Texans are going to dare the Broncos to have Russell Wilson throw for 300 yards in this one. The Broncos kind of did that to Cleveland this last week. They dared them to throw. They said, we really want to come up here and help stop the run game, and they still struggled to stop it, even with trying to dare them to do it. And the Browns fell for it. So I don't want to see the Broncos do that, of fall for that, of we're going to have Russell Wilson throw it for 40 times in this game. But finding those opportunities to still back the defense off with some timely throws, that's still going to be very, very important for this game if the Broncos offense is going to be able to do anything.
Yeah, they have to stick with the run. Like you just can't fully abandon it, because then when you get one-dimensional, you allow the defenses to just tee off on the quarterback. So you still got to keep running the ball. But the Texans, they are 5th in the NFL in defensive EPA against the run. They do a good job of limiting the run and just struggle in coverage. They are 27th in EPA against the pass. They are 21st in explosive play rate. They are really bad on first downs. They are 21st in early down EPA play, 24th in EPA play in general. And the biggest thing is like, if the Broncos were to abandon the run against this, the Texans pass rush isn't great. Their PROE, pass rush over expected, is negative 1.56%, which is 20th in the NFL. So they are getting less pressure than you would expect them to. So this is a game where, obviously, as I said, you don't abandon the run. But if the Broncos were to get one-dimensional, I think this Texans defense is one where they can get away with it. because of how problematic the Houston Texans defense has been against the pass, struggling to get pressure. The linebackers are often out of place. The safeties, I mean, they were hoping from development from Jalen Petrie, but he hasn't been great this season. Derek Singley's been a fine corner, but he's the best corner that they have, and the rest are struggling. So there is a significant weakness here. Still got to stick with the run and try to be bully ball a little bit and wear down that defense. But the passing offense should be able to move the ball fairly easily against this defense.
This is one of those games I really wish Greg Dulcich was healthy.
Yeah.
Because I watched that game against Jacksonville, and their tight ends had lots and lots of opportunities to go make plays. And unfortunately, Broncos might have, without Dulcich, the worst tight end situation in football. Even with Dulcich, they might have the worst tight end situation in football. You know, it's one of those underrated positions right now that the Broncos definitely could be looking at for the upcoming draft. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see. You got Will Anderson. He's a great pass rusher. And that's about it for them at this point. You know, if you get some double teams on him, you've seen where the Texans have tried to manufacture a pass rush just by sending some blitzes. You know, they're not blitz centric, but they definitely aren't afraid to send the house. And Wilson has shown pretty well, especially against this 5-game win streak. When that happens, he's ready for it. You know, there's been a couple plays he's messed up on it, but we saw against this last game against Cleveland, there's a couple times where they really tried to send the blitz, and Russell Wilson just said, all right, I'm going to throw it to this spot. Cortland Sutton, go up and make the catch, and worked pretty darn well for him in this last one. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the Broncos decide to attack this Houston Texans defense. Because like I said, it's strength on strength, weakness on weakness. And I'm a little bit worried about this game. You know, actually against Cleveland, I felt really good. It's at home. They, backup quarterback that's been struggling. I really thought the Broncos for sure were going to win that one. This Texans one, I'm a little bit lower on at this point, just because they have a quarterback that can make a lot of plays. And like I said, that defense, so good against the run. It's just going to be interesting how the Broncos go about this.
Yeah, I mean, Friday night, I was super confident about the Broncos beating the Browns. I didn't think that they would do it as badly as they did. I thought it'd be a bigger defensive bout, but nobody expected Myles Garrett to get hurt pretty early in the game to where he couldn't even use his left arm, basically. Like, nobody was expecting that. He still made some plays before and afterwards, but it basically became he was a decoy. But anyways, I felt very confident about the Broncos walking out with the win in that one. This one being on the road with what the Texans can do offensively, with how good CJ Stroud has been, and just finding that weak spot in coverage and exploiting it, how good Tank Dell has been. Like, I still think the Broncos walk out with the win here, but it's closer to 50-50 for me than the Browns game was. This is going to be, I think this is going to be a little bit of a tougher game than people think it will be.
Yeah, you're right. Like I said, of the games remaining, I mean, the Detroit game on the road, that's going to be a tough one. I probably would feel better about the Detroit game than I do about the Texans game right now. I just, for some reason, I have a feeling, like I said, this Texans game, just with having Stroud with the way he's playing right now. And it's not like he has great weapons around him. You got Tank Dell, who's outstanding. And I loved him in the draft. But he went to the perfect situation, a quarterback that can take advantage of what he does on the field. And but beyond him, you look at the rest of that receiver core, they're not great players. They've been other places and have not been what they are there in Houston. And that's just a sign of a great quarterback when they really up a player's game like that. So definitely going to be a great test for the secondary. He does every once in a while try to force one. So you can take advantage of him every once in a while. But they're going to have to pick their opportunities. And I think fans are going to have to get used to this idea of bend, don't break in this one.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're going to give them some of these yards, but once we get to the red zone, we're going to try to clamp down just because they can beat you over the top. You get too aggressive, Tank Dell's taking it for you. And so like I said, I think they're going to be a little bit more cautious on some of that, pick their opportunities. And I still expect the defense to do well, but this will definitely be one of the tougher tests that they have remaining.
Yeah, I will say that Nico Collins has actually been a really good receiver for them this year too.
Yeah.
But when I watch the Texans, part of me wonders how much of that is CJ Stroud elevating what Nico Collins is doing, and how much of that is Nico Collins. It's both, but it's just how much of which goes into it. And we have a comment here from K-Pop saying, even though PS2 isn't what he was last year, I trust him versus Tank. Tank Dell is not the guy you want Surtain against. You want him up against Nico Collins.
Yep.
Just because it is a far better matchup. Tank Dell will leave him in the dust. Surtain is great. One of the best corners in the NFL, not trying to take that away from him. But he has struggled this season specifically with quick receivers and jittery receivers with speed. Chosen Anderson, Robbie Anderson, whatever his name is now of the Dolphins, absolutely whipped him for that big touchdown. DJ Moore beat him a couple times. Quicker, little shiftier receiver. It's just that when he gives up catches this year, it has been to those types of receivers. So not the guy that I would want him up against. I would do whatever I can to put Jaquan McMillan up against Tank Dell personally, and just live or die by that. And give him safety help over the top, of course. But I think the matchup of McMillan against Dell is far better than Surtain against Dell.
Right. And you can, this is one of those games where you can trust Surtain against Nico Collins and say, like, we're just giving you this guy the entire game. You go shut him down, and we're just not even going to worry about him. So now we can have some extra guys to help in these other areas. You know, Justin Simmons helping over the top so that they don't have those explosive plays, because the Texans have been one of the best teams in football for explosive plays this year. So like I said, having Justin Simmons be able to roam back there would be huge for this defense. And like I said, I think McMillan, with a little bit of that quickness that he has, I think he can not shut Tank Dell down by himself, but with that extra help, I think that can be a pretty decent matchup for the Broncos.
Yeah, and I think it's a situation where you're not necessarily trying to shut Dell down. You're just trying to limit the overall impact of him. And when you have great receivers, that's what your goal is. You're not going to stop Devontae Adams. You're going to try to limit him. You're not going to stop DJ Moore. You're going to try to limit him. You're not going to stop Courtland Sutton for the most part. You're going to try to limit him. And that's kind of what the Broncos have to do here, is do whatever they can to limit what Tank Dell can do. And I know there's a common thought of, like, put your best corner against the best receiver. I get it, but you have to factor in play style matchups as well, because if you're putting a guy against who's not the fastest corner in the world against a really fast corner, it's going to lead to some issues for the defense. And one thing I will give Vance Joseph credit for is he has done a really good job this year of putting, the best corner on the best receiver when it makes sense, and finding and playing more so to the matchup aspect of it than, just the overall, like, skill level aspect.
Right. Well, you saw in this last game against the Browns, he went up against Njoku a few times in one-on-one coverage, just because he's got that size that can stick with a guy like that. And so those kind of moves where, like I said, just trying to find great matchups for your players, putting them in the best position to win is something that I've loved about Vance Joseph over this nice stretch here. Like, he's learned his players. He's figured out strengths, weaknesses, and he's trying to put them in a great position to go out there and have success. And so I think that definitely continues this week, but it'll be a close game, always on the road. It's always a little bit tougher, obviously. But I'm with you. I'm leaning towards the Broncos winning this one, because I think they, a rookie quarterback, I think Sean Payton and Vance Joseph can come up with a decent game plan to figure out how to contain him as much as possible. And Sean Payton has shown he can come up with enough on offense to give them that victory there at the end. So I'm leaning that way right now. We'll see. Injury reports still have to come out. There's still a lot of time in between now and the game. But I did real quick. I mean, I know we're getting close to the end of the show here, but our topic actually was power rankings. And so I just wanted to hit on this just real quick of Pro Football Talk actually put the Broncos at 10th in their rankings this week. They're the first to really jump the Broncos up to that kind of level. The others are still kind of keeping them in that middle of the pack area. NFL.com has them at 15. ESPN has them at 13. But you see that with Pro Football Talk. They really believe like this is the real deal. This is who they are as the Broncos. And a lot of it has to do with just the quality of opponents. You know, when you win 5 games in a row, a lot of times it's against, at least half of them are against like middling teams, you know, that are kind of bottom 10, not that great of teams. But the Broncos, you know, obviously beating the Chiefs, one of the top 5 teams in football right now. Bills, I know that they were struggling at that point. There's still a lot of people who have great belief in that team with Josh Allen. And then you think about Minnesota was the hottest team coming into that game. You know, they've fallen off here a little bit just because of the quarterback situation. And of course, the Browns. A lot of people have them in the top 10 of teams. Even with this backup quarterback situation going on, they've been able to win games with backup quarterbacks not even doing great football. It's been crazy to see with especially their defense. I know we talk a lot about the Broncos defense, but the Browns defense has been outstanding. And I think that's the part for me that just really stood out this last week was how much the offense really stepped up. You know, the defense was great. I expected that, especially against a backup quarterback. But for them to go out there and have 2 80-yard drives down the field for touchdowns, you know, the weeks before that, it was just frustrating watching them start at like the 50-yard line and barely be able to settle for a field goal. So for them to make those kind of drives, it just made me feel much better about where the offense is going compared to what they've been in the past. Are you kind of in that same place, or are you still holding off on the offense?
I mean, I still have my issues with the offense, but they have definitely, you know, helped themselves because of the quality of defenses they have been playing. The Minnesota Vikings defense was a solid defense, but what they did attacked the weakness of the offense and they handled it well. Wasn't the best, but they did well against it. The Browns, they found something on tape that they could exploit and they just attacked it over and over and over again. And when the Browns went to stop it, they changed it up and attacked differently. It was very heads up play calling by Sean Payton. Great pre-snap reads by Russell Wilson to help it all. This offense is now really starting to put things together where even I harped on the lack of production out of Wilson compared to the contract. But the point is that I was making then is that you can still live with it if he's giving you this quality of play. And now they're going against defenses that are much tougher against the run, but they're weaker against the pass. So maybe the production will balance out a little bit. And as to your point about the teams they've played, I mean, it's the worst team was probably the Packers that they beat. And that was the first game when they were still, you know, putting things together on defense and on offense. Then they go and they beat the Chiefs. They beat the Bills. The Vikings game, that was tough. But as you talked about, they were, you know, on a hot streak. But when you look at what the Vikings, their hot streak, they were beating mostly bad teams outside of the 49ers. So the Broncos have stepped up and proven themselves against tough matchups during this win streak, which is not something you can say very often.
All right, we got Phil McLaughlin coming in again saying, I have liked seeing Bonitto progression. Do you think he is going to level off or can he grow more? I agree. I think they found his niche for the game. You know, his ability to go after the quarterback, speed around the edge, third down specialist. I have a hard time seeing him turn into a true 3-down player. You know, the draft analyst in me, I mean, we talked about this when he was drafted, saying that this is going to be his issue, that he just can't be a true 3-down player. He's got athleticism out the wazoo. I mean, it's incredible what he can do with his speed around the edge. But his ability to anchor, he's got a size problem. You know, he's just on that skinny side of things. And as much as you can learn to anchor, it doesn't matter if you're still at like 235 pounds going up against a 300-pounder. Like they're still going to probably win that most of the time. And so I do think what you're seeing right now is probably what you can expect moving forward, that he's going to be a third down specialist. You just hope that the injuries don't pile up at the position where he has to become that true full-time starter.
I think we'll start seeing more consistency out of him, because there's been a lot of points of here's a great game as a pass rusher, and then here's almost nothing as a pass rusher. Then here's something, it's all right, production as a pass rusher. Here's another great game. So I think we're going to see more balance for it. But over the last 3 games, especially, I absolutely have loved what they have done with Nick Bonitto. They have pulled him off the ball a little bit in running situations and let him spy the quarterback, which makes sense when you look at the quarterbacks they were playing during that time, and just keeping him in space a little bit to where his athleticism can help, still in running situations or passing plays without rushing the quarterback, by playing a little bit off a little bit and just, trying to fill the lanes, trying to read the play. But he still is contributing as a pass rusher. He had 9 pressures. He led the team against the Browns. And he had a couple of them that were unblocked pressures, but he set up a beautiful pass rush against the left tackle, I believe, where it started as a ghost and then he's changed it into a spin. And it was, I believe, the sack that he got. It was just a beautiful play by him. And it really shows the growth that he's had with the technical aspects of being a pass rusher instead of just relying on his athleticism to win, like he was doing earlier in the season and even last year.
Yeah, I'm with you. He definitely came into the league. I remember watching him at Oklahoma, and he hardly ever used his hands. Mm-hmm. Like, he just was like, boom, I'm just going to beat this guy to the spot. And just watching him have no technique with his hands of fighting off an offensive tackle, I was like, oh, this guy has a long ways to go. Like, you see the talent. You definitely do. But in the NFL, there's a lot of really athletic guys. The guys that separate themselves are the ones, like you said, that learn the technical side of it and learn the moves and then the counter moves to really set things up. That was what Vaughn was. Vaughn was athletic, but he was also a technician. Mm-hmm. I saw somebody in here talk about that of Vaughn against the run. Like, he learned how to become a great anchor in the run game. He learned how to get low to use that ability to hold his position and then shed a blocker to go make a play in the run game. And I don't think he can quite get to that level, obviously, because Von Miller's obviously a Hall of Famer, but he can get better. I'm not saying that he's completely leveled off by any means. I think there's just always going to be a little bit of a limitation to where he can go. And what he brings to the team, it's absolutely needed. You need that kind of pass rusher that can win in a second and a half off the edge, where a quarterback has to either get rid of it right away as soon as they get the ball, or it's trouble for them. That's why he's forced some fumbles, because he just gets back there so quickly. Teams are not ready for it. You need that kind of guy. So I think it's great that he's on the team. I just, like I said, I hope he's not at that point where we have to start him because of injuries.
Yeah, he for me is like that great third rusher that you need to have. Not going to do much on rundowns, but you can put him in with fresh legs and use that athleticism and continue to improve his technique and be a consistent force in third down situations. And you can get creative with it too, as we've been seeing Vance Joseph do a lot recently, of lining up like Browning and Bonitto next to each other, or Cooper and Bonitto, and just using that to create even more confusion on the offensive line, which opens up the door for when they get that down, they can start, expanding off that and doing more stunts and twists and stuff like that off these looks that they're giving opposing quarterbacks and offensive linemen to create even more problems for them without trying to handle these guys. Browning next to Bonitto has been super effective over recent weeks, and I absolutely love watching, this exotic look with the defensive front.
Yeah, and I've seen a couple people make the comment of, what if Bonitto adds more weight? This is my worry with that. Is he sacrificing explosiveness? Because that's the best part of his game. I think he can add a little bit of weight. I just think he has a pretty slim frame for the NFL. He's still 6'2", 6'3", so he's tall enough. But I'm afraid if you add 20 pounds, you really take away from the best part of his game if you do that. I remember Von Miller put on some weight one year, and it was kind of bad weight. I think it was maybe his 4th year in the league. That's the year he got hurt. And I remember he talked about, like, I need to put on 15 pounds. and then he blew out his knee, and he wasn't quite the same player. Like, he was still great, but he wasn't like Hall of Fame level that we'd come to know in those first few years. And so I guess it would have been his third season, 2013. That's when he got hurt. And so that'd be my one caution with trying to do that with Bonitto. You got to add it on slowly. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe 5 pounds a year that you're trying to do so you can keep that explosiveness.
Yeah, and I'm not sure he has a great frame to add much more weight to it. I mean, obviously anybody can add weight, but it's the quality of weight. You want good weight on them. That's why when you see some of these offensive tackles that are 6'6", 6'7", and 350, 380 pounds, a lot of it's bad weight, and they'll get knocked for that bad weight. And there'll be a lot of time spent from coaching and training staffs to try to improve that. Well, with Nick Bonitto is you want to try to add more weight to it. I think there's room for a little bit, but not much. Maybe 5 to 10 pounds is about what you can get out of him. And that is still a bit of a risk for him with the explosiveness that he has. So I think it's a bit of a risk. And with what he is, I'm fine with where he's at, and just let him keep doing it and just continue building up muscle on his body a little bit and improving the technique.
There you go. Well, Michael, you're helping to close us out for the evening. He comes in with another star saying, great show tonight, Carl and Eric, on building the Broncos. Go Broncos. And yeah, appreciate each and every one of you joining us here this evening. And hopefully Nick will be back next week. But Eric, appreciate you stepping in and bringing the Christmas spirit with the hat. And, you know, it's like I said, it's just great to know that we're coming into December football and Broncos are relevant. Like, every one of these games is going to matter moving forward here, and definitely have a chance for the playoffs. So make sure you guys are following us on Twitter. You can follow me at Carl Dumler MHH. You can follow Eric at Erick Trickel, and make sure you guys are also heading over to the Mile High Huddle Twitter page as well. And make sure you're also on Facebook. If you are on Facebook, like and share on there as well. But we got facebook.com/Mile High Huddle Pod. That will let you know every time that we go live. You know, every day, 7 o'clock, we're trying to be here, but you also have the morning shows. You've got the after game breakdown. You don't want to miss any of that. So make sure you guys are heading over there. If you can, go over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star rating or whatever rating you want to leave. And I promise you, we read those. We appreciate all the feedback that you can give us. And if you're on YouTube, make sure you guys head over there and subscribe, like, and share for us. It just really helps to get everything out there. If you guys like us, like I said, head over. That's one of the best things you can do. We love the super chats, but I promise you, we really love when you go out there and subscribe to our show and share it with everyone out there. And so anyway, I appreciate everyone, like I said, coming here this evening. And as Nick always likes to close out the shows, choose kindness, choose compassion, and go Broncos. Hopefully another win this week.